It's awesome to have role models and take lessons from people, but everyone is on their own journey. So trust yourself, trust your own lessons that you're learning, and you can certainly draw on other people's experiences. But yeah, just remember that it's your own path, and that's the exciting part too.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Fiona O'Keeffe today, back on the Running Effect podcast. I had the privilege of having her twice, once in 2021, a second time in 2022. And since those two conversations, she's been on fire. She's a professional runner for Puma. She signed with them in 2021. She's currently coached by Amy and Alistair Craig, based out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And last year ago, around this time in February 2024, she won the U.S. Olympic Marathon Trials in Orlando, Florida. That was her debut marathon, cementing her Olympic berth and forever putting her name among the greats as an Olympic trials champion. She holds PRs of 15:01 in the 5K, 30:52 in the 10K, 67:42 in the half marathon, and 2:22:10 in the full marathon, which came from that race at the Olympic trials. Thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with Fiona today. We dive into some of the recent performances, that performance last year, how it shaped her mindset, how she dealt with pressure and expectation leading out of it, her plans for 2025, what would make it a successful year, and so much more. Love this conversation. Confident you guys are going to enjoy it as well. If you do, share it with a friend. Would also appreciate you hitting the follow and subscribe button so you never miss another episode. Give us a 5-star review and check the show notes below. We might still have merch left. It might be sold out, but check that out if we still have it. Fill out the podcast survey link. Helps us expand and grow the show, become better. That's my goal for you guys, and all the other fun links below. Hope you guys enjoy this one. Hope it accompanies you on your run and that you guys are doing amazing. Without further ado, enjoy my conversation with the one and only Fiona O'Keeffe. Ladies and gentlemen, she's back. Fiona O'Keeffe, welcome back to the Running Effect podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm pretty good. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
Looking on my Spotify right now, you've been on the podcast twice before, but I don't remember those because they were so long ago. The first time I had you on the podcast was literally March 16th, 2021, when you were still at Stanford. What do you remember from 2021? And if I went back to that version of yourself and said, you know, you're going to make the Olympics one day, you're going to be a US champion in the marathon, you're going to be sponsored by Puma, like how shocked would you have been?
Yeah. So I think that was right after I'd signed with Puma in the very beginning. So things were just getting started. I think that I would have been really surprised by the timeline of things. Like if you told me, oh, you'll do these things by the time you're, in your 30s, I might be like, okay, cool. Like that's awesome. I can't wait to get there. But if you told me that it would all unfold within the next few years, I would have been shocked.
What do you feel like has led up to those moments to kind of expedite the timeline? As you mentioned, like maybe you would have expected into your 30s, you're in your 20s. What do you feel like has helped you achieve some of those results way earlier than you expected?
I think some of it was just like the way that training itself kind of played out, that the longer stuff ended up coming along a lot more naturally than the track, especially with how fast things have gotten in the 10,000 on the track, and seeing the way that has gone. And then I ended up getting onto the roads a bit sooner than I expected. It was kind of my first summer as a pro. The roads just felt like a good way to get back into things and start putting myself in those competitive situations. And I just really enjoyed those opportunities. And I felt like it was just a natural fit with the roads. And then also it's been huge having Amy here as one of my coaches, guiding that path to the marathon. Someone who knows it so well has been invaluable.
What have and are the conversations with Amy like in terms of your perspective on the roads, your pursuit within the sport of road running, as you mentioned, someone who did it at such a high level back in the day, and what's that coach-athlete relationship like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I feel like she's just very generous with sharing a lot of aspects of her experience. So things that have worked for her, little mental tricks, and then also areas where she feels like, oh, maybe I I could have done this differently. So just that level of openness and sharing all the details of kind of how she'd go about her daily routine as a marathoner was really helpful coming out of school.
What would you say is I'm sure it's hard to pinpoint it to one, but biggest takeaway from her as a coach, biggest lesson you've learned from her?
Honestly, I feel like she's just a very positive person. So it never feels like setbacks are, insurmountable. And this is a sport that's gonna, not always be easy. There's gonna be a lot of challenges along the way. So I think she's really good at helping find a way to reframe things and move through them and then get excited about the next opportunity.
Let's talk about this upcoming spring, coming back from injury. How do you feel right now, and what's it been like building back momentum?
Yeah, I've been feeling good lately. It's been really great getting back into training with the team, and we have some new faces around, and that's been a lot of fun. I've been lining up more with Taylor Rowe and then Miriam Dake, who's here. She moved here from Germany, actually. So it's been really great to work with them. It's been a very gradual build back into full training, so I don't feel like we've rushed things at all. But yeah, happy with where things are for now and really excited to get back to racing. I imagine I will be pretty rusty out there, but that's okay.
I think a lot of people experience injuries or setbacks in the first few weeks or even months. Sometimes it can be a hard adjustment to build back that fitness. As someone who kind of just went through that, what would be some advice to build back fitness as well as that confidence piece? Because you can be fit, but if the confidence is lacking, it can be tough in races.
Yeah, I guess I would say, trust that it will come back. And try looking more at maybe where you came from when you were really in the thick of the injury recovery, and try to compare more to that version of yourself than maybe like your best version of peak fitness and peak form, because those are more marginal gains that will actually come sooner. But if you compare to let's say I'm doing my first track workout, but 5 weeks ago, I was still in the pool or something like that, then it's like, okay, well, I actually have made way more progress than I was thinking. And now, maybe if I envision 5 weeks down the road, I can be excited about all the steps that I'm going to take at that point versus, comparing to when I set my PR and feeling like I'm not there yet.
We mentioned those conversations with Amy as well as our conversation in 2021, right after you had signed with Puma. You were, I think, one of a few people, if I'm not mistaken, that kind of helped to launch that group. What's it been like over the past 4 years, seeing the evolution, of the group, but also the brand? I think Puma, historically has been the sprints brand, with Usain Bolt and all the Jamaican sprinters and even some high level sprinters from other countries, including the US. But I feel like with you and the group in Chapel Hill, it was their introduction, their homecoming to the sport of distance running, and you helped kind of channel that. What's this process been like over the past 4 years of cementing them as a very credible brand within the sport of running?
Yeah, for sure. It's been very cool to see the way that the brand itself has stepped it up, just in terms of developing the shoe technology. I feel like we're highly competitive at this point. Total confidence in the shoes that I was racing in at the trials, for example. And then seeing them bring on more distance runners across the board has been really cool. I think they're very invested in the marathon in particular, which is exciting. And then as for our group, it's definitely been an evolution. I feel like at this point, we're in a really good spot, and I feel like we have kind of a unique diversity in our group that's been really great to see and experience, because we have people running everywhere from the 800 up to the marathon, but we all manage to work in together, and we have people representing different countries. So there's just a lot of diversity of experience, but we all manage to come together and kind of feed off of that and use that as an asset, which I think makes our group a little bit unique.
Let's talk about a year, 13 months ago, the U.S. Olympic Marathon Trials. You end up winning. I remember being in Orlando that day, and it was just crazy. Yeah, it was crazy. Take me through that day. I won't talk about it. I'll let you talk about it. But just wild day, probably one of the best days of your life. How things unfolded.
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely didn't have a sense of pressure, too much expectation going into the race, which I realized was a blessing, and it won't be the case at future trials. But I was honestly, like, I'd been really nervous the night before, but when I woke up in the morning, I was pretty excited. I was just excited to go race and see what I could do and experience the marathon. And I'd gotten to a point where I believed that I had a good chance at making the team. But of course, you don't know what's going to happen until you're out on the course and the racing really gets going. So yeah, I remember going to the line, warming up with my teammate Natasha Rogers at the time. So it was kind of the two of us, and then the race starts going. And the nice thing about the marathon is you actually feel really good for a while. I mean, on a good day. So it was honestly just really fun, like the first 10 miles or so, and, you know, going through the motions of picking up my bottles at the stations and everything. Like, everything was so new and fresh still. And then I remember the racing really started getting going maybe a little before halfway. I think Dakota went to the front, and I kind of followed her. And then it just kind of picked up from there. And then I think around mile 16 to 18 is where I ended up putting in that move. I fully expected that I'd have like a big old group in tow with me. But I guess, yeah, ended up maybe catching people by surprise. Yeah, next thing I knew, I was running on my own, and I was really excited, but I was also definitely running scared because I had never experienced, you know, mile 20, 21, 22 of a marathon before, outside of training, I guess. So that's the point in time that people always talk about, you know, hitting the wall. So it was kind of just waiting for it to happen, and it got really hard, but I guess there was enough fitness and excitement in there that I was able to keep pushing. And yeah, crossing the line was like such an unbelievable feeling. So yeah, that was the race.
How much did you visualize that moment or dream about that moment in your head? And what was it like to actually live it out? Did it feel real?
Yeah, it definitely felt super surreal. I think it didn't feel real until like that last stretch of the race, and still kind of like full body chills. Like, it wasn't fully registering. I think that I loosely visualized what it would be like to make the team quite a bit, but I don't know if I ever let myself think about what it would feel like. And yeah, to actually experience it was totally different, and way more like overwhelming in a good way than I could have imagined.
What were your conversations with Amy leading into this race? I'm specifically curious because in 2016, she made the team, if I'm not mistaken, on the year, I think it was that year. She made the team for Rio, but the trials were held in LA, so it was like a little more hot, super stacked field. And then Orlando for you, super hot, super stacked field. What were the conversations leading into it, and how did she give you the confidence and equip you with the tools to make you feel like you could step on that starting line and genuinely feel like you had a shot at top 3?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, all of us, me, her, and Alistair, talked about training and felt like that side of things had shown that I was in a good place and ready to go for it. But specifically with Amy, I remember some of the advice that she gave was that there is so much riding on the line the day of trials that sometimes it's just the people who can keep it together the best going into the race and the day of the event that end up walking away with that result that we all want. So yeah, it was kind of trying to be optimistic, but not put too much pressure on it. And then, just take care of business and the details, and just be ready to give myself a chance.
How much do you feel like not having, like, you had nothing to lose? How much do you think that helped you on the line?
Yeah, I think that it definitely did help a lot because I know that, for someone like Emily Sisson, there's definitely a ton of pressure coming into a situation like that as the American record holder. For me, it felt like, okay, if I have a bad day and I miss the team, then, obviously that's not what I want, but it's not a catastrophic outcome. So I guess it felt like I was able to definitely run with a lot of freedom. And I think that maybe I would have felt a little bit more inhibited with more expectation coming into it.
You win the trials. Well, real quickly there too, debut marathon. I'm sure if I asked you before, you probably would have been like, my best day is making the team. Were you shocked at all by winning? Like top 3, I'm sure you would have been thrilled with.
Yeah, absolutely. yeah. I think that, I'd gotten to a point where, like I said, I believed that I could make the team, but I didn't envision that scenario of me winning the race or winning by that margin. I think I envisioned like coming in third place and being over the moon.
Right.
And that was like the dream outcome. So definitely exceeded expectations.
Do you remember what crossing the finish line felt like?
Yeah, definitely. It was like definitely the biggest rush of emotion I've ever felt, crossing the finish line of a race, because you're coming down the stretch and it's so loud, and then there's this wall of photographers. So it's a very different experience from like the finish of a lot of my like track 10Ks, for example, or a road race where it's like pretty low key. You finish, you're exhausted, you're like, well, that was pretty good. But this is immediately like, I know what this means. I know that I made the team. And then I remember just like turning around to see like what the rest of the team was going to be, and watching everyone who came in. Was honestly like so inspirational to see that everyone had given it, 110% on that day. And all the emotions coming out at that finish line were pretty crazy to witness.
When you win the trials, everything shifts. Like you could go from, even if you were well known, you go from being well known to like the person everyone talks about you for a month or two. I feel like you go on every single podcast, like you're being talked about constantly, expectations start being put on you, pressure starts building. For you personally, I'm sure those feelings were maybe exacerbated too, because going into the trials, very few people were talking about you. What was that like? How did you handle that? And can you just give some like, I don't know, perspective to the listener of like how much your life actually changes and how you're even viewed as a runner and talked about is just like Fiona O'Keeffe's name is everywhere, and I'm sure you had to deal with that. What was that like?
Yeah, that was definitely interesting. It was pretty day and night. I feel like I'd had some solid performances in the couple years leading up to it, and even some days that I was really happy with myself, but it felt like a lot of that kind of flew under the radar for various reasons. Like one of my really good races was, I guess at Bix, which is a 7-mile road race in Iowa. So it's not going to have the same kind of coverage as the Olympic trials. And I think also like I'm fairly low key when it comes to like public attention and that kind of thing. So I wasn't ever trying to, really put myself out there prior to the trials. And then after, to have all this attention suddenly and all these requests, it was definitely an adjustment. I'm grateful that my agent, Tom Ratcliffe, helped me navigate it, and also having someone like Amy who had had that experience, although she was much more established in her career by the time that she won trials. So I don't think it was as sudden of a shift. But no, it was definitely a lot to navigate. I think that I would change some things if I went back, but also I think that I kind of had to, there was only one way to learn. Was going through it.
Obviously, and I'm sure talked about this in our former conversations years ago. I quite frankly don't remember a single thing we talked about just because it was so long ago. But you were like a very quality athlete back in high school. You were the 2014 Gatorade California Cross Country Run of the Year. And then in college at Stanford, I know you were a multi-time All-American, if I'm not mistaken. So you're very, very good. But like to be Olympic trials champion, you not only have to be very good, but you generally have to be healthy, have a good block of training, and then like be better than the best of the best in the country on the day. And for all those stars to align is like very unlikely, which is why I think it's like so impressive to do. How much does this mean to you in the context of the rest of your career, specifically leading up to it, where like you were a great athlete, but no one in college at Stanford was like, you're going to go win the Olympic trials, specifically in the marathon? Like, how cool is it, even present day, a year removed, to be like, this is something I'll forever have? Like, I could retire tomorrow and be talked about, as one of the greats.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess it just makes me think about, how many different paths there are to your goals, and all the different paths that I've seen other runners take too, people that I admire a lot. There's not one linear progression that's guaranteed. And I think that there's so many great stories in the sport about people who've taken time off, and, women who've gone and had kids and come back and, then been performing at their highest level ever. So I guess I just think that it's a good reminder that you never know what's going to happen if you just keep putting in the time and keep chipping away.
What would you say is the biggest lesson you learned from that experience of winning the Olympic trials, or even the months after?
Yeah, I think that it's hard to distill it down into just one lesson. But I guess even though it is like such a meaningful moment and accomplishment, I guess, that really, like, I guess not getting overly swept up in the successes or the failures is still so important. So I see that as a very important moment in my career, but I definitely don't see it as like, hopefully not as the peak. And also, I just feel like I still have so much to learn. Like, I think that just because you have that one good outcome, especially because I think that for me, it came so early in my career, particularly as a marathoner. I think that it would be the biggest mistake I could make was to think that that performance meant that I had things totally dialed in. So I feel like, especially the months following, I had a lot of very humbling moments and experiences. And I feel like it's kind of holding both of those things, that like, okay, I can achieve this very high level of success, and yet it doesn't mean that I'm automatically going to be successful. I have to continue to improve and really just look at how I can do things better day to day. If I want to have like longevity in this sport and continue chasing bigger things in the future.
How do you feel like that performance and winning there kind of reshaped your mind for what's possible for the rest of your career? Because I'm sure it set like a new ceiling. Like you said, maybe was something you wanted to do in your career, but probably didn't expect it to happen so early on. Mm-hmm. How do you feel like it kind of like raised the ceiling for your dreams and goals and vision?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like it definitely showed me definitively that I belong on the roads, that I like, I'll still race on the track here and there probably, but it showed me that I probably have a lot more upside, just the longer the distance is. And then it also, I guess, opened my eyes to like U.S. women's marathoning is incredibly competitive, and it's never going to be an easy day out there, but also that I want to challenge myself at the international level and, see what's possible, putting myself in situations that stretch me further as well.
What excites you the most right now?
Right now, I'm really excited to race again and have like a good number of races lined up this year. I feel like that's one thing that is a bit of a bummer with the marathon sometimes is you do have to limit your racing opportunities a bit and be really dialed in. So at least this spring, I'm excited to be focused on some shorter races and just get out there a bit more than I would have the opportunity to do in a marathon buildup. Because that's the part of the sport that I love most is just the simple act of racing itself.
Sure. What would you say that the focus and the goals are for 2025? Like obviously 2024 is like dream world, make the team. And then if you make the team, like Olympics, whereas this year, there's maybe less, there's always major marathons. So maybe a poor way of framing it, but what are the goals for this year? Obviously a little bit of a different perspective and shift.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the first chunk of this year, especially, is about just continuing to work back in a way that makes sense and really sets me up for the years to come and the build up to 2028. Because those cycles go way more quickly than you expect them to. I think this year is just about setting a really strong foundation, getting back in some competitive race situations, and then lining up for whichever fall marathon ends up fitting in with the schedule the best.
What are some things you want to accomplish before the end of your career? And it doesn't even have to be like run X time, but even like the World Marathon Majors, which ones are you excited to run that you haven't? Are there like any niche races that you haven't raced that you're excited to race? And what are some of those things that get you excited or maybe you daydream about on a double to make the miles go by faster?
Yeah, I definitely would love to run all the marathon majors probably at some point. The idea of doing some of the international ones sounds really fun as well. And finish as high as I can at those races. I think that what excites me more, especially at this moment in time, is those competitive situations, whether that's major marathons or championship races. So trying to go after high finishes in those sort of situations, getting myself on more U.S. teams is something that excites me. And then I would still like to improve my 5K and 10K. I need to get under 15 minutes because my PR right now is 15:01. And then aside from the competition side, I'd really like to, have left this team better than I found it and contributed to, hopefully like a lot of group success here, whether that's just, helping pace a workout or giving advice to younger people on the team about stuff that I've learned from my career. I don't know. I guess in general, I just would like to see if I can find out what my potential in the sport is and hopefully stay in it for a long time.
We talked about the World Marathon Majors there briefly. What's your take, someone who's in it, in the weeds, take on Sydney? Would you ever race Sydney? And do you think it'll take a few years for it to actually get pretty competitive from a field's perspective?
Yeah, I'm definitely for it. I'd love to go to Australia. We have Pat Tiernan on our team is Australian, so I feel like it could be a fun opportunity to go over there with someone who knows the country really well. I have no idea. I could see it taking off pretty quickly if it gets listed as an official major. But yeah, no idea.
This is probably a way, assuming like you probably have never thought of this, but as someone who queen of the marathon, like Sydney, I'm guessing is probably like 10 hours behind or ahead or something like that for those sort of situations. Or you probably dealt with this with Tokyo. Like, do you just like fly in 2 weeks in advance to adjust? And what's that process like? Or would be
I
like?
feel like you look at just like how big the time difference is, and then the bigger the time difference, the more, the farther out, I guess you would try to get over there, so you're not waking up super jet lagged on race day.
Speaking of the Olympics, off the roads, what were some highlight moments? Who was your favorite athlete you met? How was the food? What's all the tea on the Paris Olympics?
The one night I went to the track to watch actually was the night of the men's 1500 final, which was an amazing night to be there. So that was a crazy race to watch. So impressive. And the stadium itself was so cool. So much good energy in there. So felt very lucky to be there in person for that. Let's see. Honestly, I thought the food was like perfectly fine, like even good for feeding that many people at once, and being a dining hall setting. I was pretty impressed. Like, yeah, sure, you wouldn't want to eat there for 2 months straight or whatever, but I feel like that would be the case in any sort of dining hall atmosphere. And I don't know, it's kind of fun just to see all the athletes from different countries in the dining hall and guess which sport people were just based on, what they were wearing, and all the different builds of different athletes is pretty funny to witness. Like, you can tell, like, oh, those are the gymnasts, like those must be the rugby players, that kind of thing. And the village, like, it surprised me how big it was, and how friendly people were. One of my favorite little traditions in the village is that people will trade their pins with each other. So each country like has these Olympic pins, and someone from Kazakhstan will come up to you and ask to trade a pin. So that was a fun way to just meet people in like these small little interactions.
When do you feel like you first had the Olympic dream? Were you like super young, a kid watching on the TV, or was it something that got more baked as you became more and more serious within the sport?
Yeah, I feel like I think the first Olympics I remember paying attention to that would have been 2008. So yeah, Beijing. And I remember watching it and thinking it was like amazing. And, of course I wanted to be there someday. But then I think almost as I got older and understood like how difficult it is to make a team, it in some ways like felt farther away. But then watching, I think in 2020 or 2021, whatever it actually was, some people that I knew, like Elise Cranny and Grant Fisher, got themselves on the team. And that kind of, I feel like, brought it back into focus as like, okay, like these people are, amazing athletes, but they're coming from the same background as I did. And, they're doing exactly what I've dreamed of. So that was a lot of positive fuel for the fire, I guess, for the next few years to try to just take a chance on myself and chart a path.
I know you get so much free stuff at the Olympics. How many checked bags did you fly home with?
Oh gosh, I consolidated a couple of them. It must have been at least 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to unpack?
Honestly, some of the stuff is still in my garage.
Really?
Yeah.
Legendary. Yeah. Legendary. Was it nice post Olympics to like just take a little bit of a breather? And how important do you think that is for someone listening to have those moments where shouldn't train all the way through the year? You should have those moments where you can take a step back from the sport and relax and shut your brain off.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was absolutely necessary at that point, physically and mentally, for me to take a break. But I would encourage anyone, to ideally build in those breaks before you're forced to take them, because your body and mind really will force you to take them if you're not taking the initiative to plan downtime where you can be less intense and less focused, and kind of expand your perspective and use your mental energy on other things besides just, okay, how fast can I run? Because I feel like I did need to recharge on a deeper level than just, healing my injury. And that time after was really valuable for that.
New York half coming up. How do you feel? What are the goals? Excited to race, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, for sure. Very excited. Goals are just to go compete. I know that the course is different this year. I've never run there before, but I've just heard a little bit about it. So I think we're going over the Brooklyn Bridge, and the field looks really good. So I'm just excited to go mix it up. With the course being different, it's hard to say like what a good time even would be. But yeah, I wouldn't say time is the focus. I just want to go race and try to use those racing instincts again and hopefully channel them wisely.
What do you feel like you'd have to do this year to look back on the year at the end of the year, December 31st, and be happy with it? Feel like it was a successful, good year?
Yeah, I think getting back into some good racing, like I said, and then mainly just feeling like I'd made adjustments to my overall approach, just being more patient and taking my time building up, and focusing on like long-term health and longevity, and hopefully running a good marathon in the fall. I think if I ticked those boxes, I would feel really good about this year. I think that this year is more about laying a strong foundation and setting up the years to come, than one specific achievement.
Fiona, final serious question for you. For those who have listened to our conversation, look up to you, your career, all the things you've accomplished, what would be the final takeaway message that you want to leave with them?
Honestly, I would say that everyone is still learning. So I would say, like, just because I've achieved certain things in the sport or anyone else has doesn't mean that you should try to exactly model yourself after them. I think that it's awesome to have role models and take lessons from people. But everyone is on their own journey. So trust yourself, trust your own lessons that you're learning, and you can certainly draw on other people's experiences. But just remember that it's your own path. And yeah, that's the exciting part too.
Final question, Fiona, any on a lighter note, favorite thing to do in Chapel Hill in the spring, non-running, can't be running related?
Okay. Probably just like go for a walk somewhere really nice outside. We have beautiful springtime weather here. And yeah, an area like Jordan Lake, it's really pretty in the spring. I love a good coffee or matcha too. So go for a walk with a good drink and read a book outside. That's pretty ideal.
Love it. That is ideal. Fiona, thank you so much for the conversation. Always bringing so much wisdom to the table and being so open about your journey and career and the successes and the setbacks. Always appreciate you and excited to see how this one impacts all who listen to it. And excited to see you back racing soon on the roads.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much. Yeah, and congrats on all the growth that the podcast has had over the last few years. It's been really cool to follow.